We're going to see the JBoss administration, and the orientation of this session is going to be with an understanding that you know WebLogic already. The admin is not from the scratch, so we're not going to assume that you don't know anything. So if you are watching this video, you should already know WebLogic by now. Otherwise, this is not for you. That's all. Right. Now, the general idea of this session is to go through JBoss from an administrative activities perspective, especially from an interviews perspective. So we'll be looking at the history of JBoss. We will see how to download and install the JBoss. We will see various versions of JBoss, then the directory structure of JBoss after the installation. We'll try to compare it with WebLogic if required. Then there's something called modes in JBoss, which is not available in WebLogic. The modes of JBoss means how the JBoss group of servers are clubbed together. The two modes are, one is standalone mode and the other one is domain mode. These are the two modes, and the important thing about these modes is they were introduced only recently, means in the latest version of JBoss. JBoss, it's called application server. The latest version is AS8, so we'll get into that one, but we will be actually working on AS7. So we will look into each of these modes, standalone mode and then the domain mode, and in these two modes we will see the exact same set of activities, how you do all these activities in standalone mode. Then we'll also see how you do all these activities in a domain mode. Then we will see which of these two modes is better. Means, should you use a domain mode or should you use a standalone mode in your environment? A reason why this is not so probably important or not so important is because the domain mode was only recently introduced, means only in the last one and a half year, because AS7 is when you have domain mode. So you don't have, before AS7 you don't have domain mode, it was always standalone. So we'll get into various aspects. Now these aspects are similar to WebLogic, like after the installation, how do you stop the servers, then what is the configuration file for standalone machine, then how do you deploy an application, then how do you create a database connection, then how do you create a cluster, then what is InfiniSpan, then, and the most important part of JBoss interviews is how you integrate JBoss with Apache. This is probably by far the most important aspect of JBoss interview that you will get asked. So make sure you are really thorough with this part, Apache integration. So if not in this video, probably in the next video we'll get into the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of how you integrate a JBoss app server and you put Apache in front of JBoss. It's just like Apache with WebLogic, but here it's much more, in fact it's much better than WebLogic. So that way it scores a lot of points. Then WebLogic is still at a very nascent or a beginning stage in terms of integration, but the integration with JBoss. So especially when you need a cluster, a JBoss definitely requires Apache server in front of it. Then we'll try to see performance tuning if possible. Then SSL configuration for JBoss is exactly like WebLogic till the point where you create a certificate. That part is same for all the app servers. But what we will see is in WebLogic we actually configure the certificate from the key store. We get into the console, we get into SSL tab and then configure. Whereas here we will see how to configure it for JBoss. All right. Now the same set of activities we're going to also see for the domain mode, which is next. All right. So let's go back and let's browse. And by the way, and this session is going to be free flow session kind of thing. There is no documentation of the technical activities. So I'll be performing the activities on the fly. So if there are any issues, we'll try to troubleshoot as we move on. All right. So let's look at the history of JBoss. Now the JBoss 7.3 AS, it's called always application server. All JBoss is called JBoss application server. So you have 5.1, 6.1, 7.1 also is there, but the latest one is 7.3. Now if you observe this, the 7.3 was released in 2013 December, but 7.1 was released somewhere in Jan, which means if you are assuming that you have worked only on AS7, you can put at max from let's see, let's go to this JBoss download page. So if you see this one, you go to the downloads page, you will see the release dates also. So we want to see when these things were released. See this one, where actually like EAP is enterprise application platform. I will talk about the difference between EAP and AS. AS is another one, AS7, AS 7.1. Now if you see this one, the JBoss AS711 was released in 2012. Alright, so even if you take A.70, this one, let's say this is this was released in 2011. So ideally, if you say you started working from 8.7, you can climb somewhere by May of 2011. So 2011 May till 2014 May. So 12, 13, 14. So 3 years you can say you worked on AS7, but your starting point should be 7 because there are a lot of differences in 6 and 7. So unless we get to a stage where we also talk about AS6, it's safe to say that you worked only on 7 and only slightly on 6. Now the major difference between 6 and 7 is the domain mode. The 7 was introduced with domain mode. Alright, so let's say you have 3 years of experience, so that would be in AS7 is what you will have. Okay, so here now if you take this one, so now let's go back. Now let's see the difference between AS and EAP. Now we all know JBoss is an open source one, but the problem is when a company wants to implement a JBoss, they will need support from time to time. So Red Hat came forward and they said we will support such a version. So application server AS7.3 is the open source version. The same set of our bundle code is actually put into enterprise application platform 6.2. GA is general availability. So when you say EAP 6.2, you actually mean AS7.3. There will be only slight differences in the code, but otherwise the code is pretty much same. EAP is actually supported by Red Hat, means you can go to a Red Hat company and you can set up a contract with those guys if there are any problems with your setup. they'll help you. So that way your EAP is a production ready version. That's what it says, enterprise application platform. Now AS 7.3 supports JDK 1.6. AS6.1 also supports 1.6. AS5 in 2000 1.5. So it is safe to assume that you should say you have worked on 6 and 7. If you can, you can claim 4 years of experience. Even though 6.1 was released in 2011 August, there might be some 6.0 versions which are available in 2010 May. So today it's we can say 4 years. 4 years means AS6 and AS7. AS7 is nothing but EAP6. Now before AS7 there were no EAP version. So if you go into this download location, so this one here, this is EAP 6.2.0. This is built from AS7.3, which is released in 2013. So when you say that you're working on JBoss, you will simply say currently you're working on EAP 6.2. But last year you were actually working on AS7 because the EAP was only recently released. Alright, so you'll say EAP is basically JBoss. AS7 is same as EAP, but you're actually working on application server code, to be precise. If somebody says which one you're exactly working on, it's AS, application server, and which is currently, let's say you're migrating from AS to EAP code. So you're downloading this new code and there will be only slight changes. Alright, that's the difference between AS and EAP. Now to avoid all this confusion, AS and EAP other thing, JBoss has found a new name for their 8 version. It's called Wildfly 8. The image, just to remember it, Wildfly JBoss. If you see this one, that really nice image they have. Alright, you see this Wildfly? This is Wildfly. Wildfly, yeah, they pick up a nice word for this. This is a wildfly usually available in jungle. Wildfly in jungle. All these things will make you remember things, so I should always do something that is not always related to technology. So wildfly in the jungle is what we are looking at. Okay. I don't think it's not coming. I think just find out, search it on your system, or let's wait. We'll come then. Okay, that's JBoss 8. Now the downloading is obviously from the same page. You go ahead and download it on the same page here. So this is where you'll download it. When you download it, you basically download a zip file. You see this one? This is a zip file that you're downloading. It's about 150 MB. If you take 6.2 GA general availability, it's about 150 MB. That's the size of your JBoss app server. Alright, now once you download it, this is a zip file, that's what you download. So once you download it, so this is what you'll get. Let's say we go into students, JBoss EAP 6.2.0.zip. This is the file you will download. So I'm going to copy it into another location. Let's say I'm JBoss TP. Let's copy the JBoss installation, cd download JBoss. Alright, copy this downloaded file. This file you have to download. Copy this file into right JBoss ITP. Okay, so we're copying it into JBoss ITP. So you downloaded it. Let's say this is the file you downloaded. Now let's get to the next step, the installation. Now the installation of JBoss is probably the easiest. Alright, there's nothing like you have, in WebLogic you have all that silent mode installation, then GUI mode installation, console mode installation. But you don't have anything out here. It's pretty simple. You just unzip the file and you have installed it. So you go ahead, unzip the file, unzip. It's a lot of noise here. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and unzip our file. So we have unzipped it. Now unzipping is basically alright. Now when you unzipped it, this is what you got. This is your JBoss home. Now instead of, let's say if we want, instead of doing a CD, let's just simply create a link. We'll be working on for the rest of our session in this directory. Link to this directory, let's call this JB. Alright, so we have, this is the JBoss home. Now let's cd to JB. This is the directory structure of JBoss. Now you will see more import. There are 4 important directories. One is bin, other one is standalone, other one is domain, another one is modules. These are the important ones in JBoss. Now if you take this one, so what you're looking at is the first thing is obviously JBoss home. Under JBoss home you have check, for example, one is bin is what you have. Alright, then you have standalone, domain, you have modules. Those are the 4 important directories. So bin is one thing, then here you have standalone, then you have domain, then you have here modules. So we'll be working in easy. Now the bin directory we all know usually have startup shutdown scripts. So here also it's the same thing. Standalone is all the configuration related things of standalone. So you will have everything about standalone mode will be in the standalone folder. everything about standalone mode. Now the same way, everything about the domain mode will be in the domain directory. So you will see everything about domain mode and domain. Then you have modules. We'll talk about modules at a later point of time when we talk about JDBC. So basically you have jar files related to each of these modules. So this is a general structure of JBoss, the directory structure. This is also similar to WebLogic home, or more like a domain home, but here uh, WebLogic is much more structured and more complicated, whereas JBoss is pretty simple. That's the beauty of JBoss. So it's easy comparatively. So let's JBoss directory structure. This is the JBoss directory structure. Alright. So here we are. So we know this. So these are the modules. This is bin. This is standalone directory. This is domain. Alright. App client is another thing. I'm not sure if we're going to talk about it. Alright. Version.text. This is going to give you the version of JBoss, but this is not a reliable information. Alright. You'll have something in the bin directory. If you go in a bin directory, let's see the .sh file. Alright, you'll be using some of these files. Right now, so with the bin files, you will see the three most important files. Standalone.sh, it's for starting a server in the standalone mode. Domain.sh, this is basically to start not a server in domain mode, but we'll talk about the structure of the domain later. Then there is a JBoss-CLI, the command line interface. Alright, then we'll be using adduser.sh. This is another command. Run.sh used to be an old command. The run.sh is basically standalone.sh. Earlier, it used to be run.sh. If you open the run.sh command, it's basically, you see this one, it's either calling domain.sh or it will be calling standalone.sh. See this one. It's calling either standalone.sh or domain.sh, depending on what your inputs are. So this used to be an earlier command, run.sh in AS6, but now that we have two modes, either you run it using standalone.sh or you run it using domain.sh. Now let me get to the so this is unzipping. This is basically installation. Then we have seen the directory structure. All right, the four important directories that we have seen, and let's look at some modes. Now, in general, all this time JBoss was more like a level 2 or a tier 2 app server. Remember one thing, it's WebLogic and WebSphere are you know uh, level 1 app servers, means they can provide all the capabilities, all the their enterprise level. JBoss is picking up now. It's pretty fast, its pickup is. So JBoss is coming to that place, but it's still probably it'll take some time. And so JBoss basically concentrate on the ease. Means it's really amazing to see how simple JBoss is, yet very powerful. So that's why many people like using JBoss. It's very simple. It doesn't complicate things too much. So in that process, all this time, JBoss is a simple JVM, right? So what we usually see is if you have a box, right? Assume the box is IP is 192.168.128.6, right? You just have a JBoss server. That's it. This is a JBoss server or JBoss instance. It's called JBoss instance, and obviously we know a JBoss instance is also a JVM, just like WebLogic. You'll be able to see when you do a ps-ef grep for Java. Alright, so this is a single JVM. There's nothing like a group of JVMs working together, all that complicated stuff. It's a single JVM. It's called standalone JVM. It's standing alone. All this was happening until AS6. Now, in AS7, the new model was introduced. That's when the domain model was introduced. So here you have two boxes or any number of boxes. All right. Then there's nothing like an admin server. There are other areas. We'll talk into domain mode later, but the discussion of the domain mode is slightly different. We'll come there later. So you have multiple JVMs. That's what is your domain mode. And to control these JVMs, you have some things called process controllers, host controllers, all that stuff. So there is a process controller, there is a host controller. It's the host controller that controls the hosts. Alright, and the process controller basically starts these things if something goes wrong. Right. So we will talk into domain mode at a later point of time. For now, so you have a single JVM is standalone mode. If there are multiple JVMs and if they can be centrally managed, it's called a domain mode. We'll get to the actual differences later. So here what we are looking at is an instance of JVM. Now once you have two modes, domain mode and standalone mode, we'll be initially concentrating on the standalone mode once we are comfortable with the general activities and the WebLogic general, the JBoss general terminology. Then we will actually get into the domain mode. Alright, there's not much of a difference between standalone mode and domain mode implementation part, but it's only the way you administer the JVMs. A domain mode allows administration, centralized administration. Then we will see the differences between these two modes in a little detail at a later point of time on a different slide. Let's look at the configuration files. Now if you see the configuration files for these two modes, they are available in the corresponding directories. So under standalone, under domain, we know that JBoss home has these two directories. There is a standalone directory, there is a domain directory. Under standalone directory, there is a standalone.xml file. Under domain directory, there is a domain.xml file. Alright, now these two are the configuration files for JBoss. So here we are in JBoss home. Let's go to JBoss standalone. So let's go to standalone. You see the configuration here. So get into configuration. Alright, now this is the file that will have all the configurations of JBoss standalone. Remember when we are saying JBoss standalone, there is only one JVM. So when you do a less on standalone.xml, you will see all these things. We will talk about these things and we'll actually discuss about various elements of a standalone.xml file later. At this time, just go through it. We'll talk about it later. So that's the standalone file. The same way you will have an XML file for domain also, domain.xml. So go in here, then configuration. You have domain.xml. This is one file, and another important file in domain mode is host.xml. So we will talk about these two files, how they relate to each other, what kind of information is available in each of these two XML files and everything else. Alright, so these are the two configuration files. Then we are also looking at the management tools. Normally when we configure JBoss, there are tools to manage like WebLogic console, WLST or config.xml. So if you have to change anything, normally even just like to compare it with WebLogic, you can change it in the XML file directly, which means you can edit this XML file, or else there are graphical tools like just like console. Here also we have console. Then this is the actual URL of accessing console. We will see the importance of 9990 port later. Then we have JBoss CLI, which is command line tool. CLI means command line command line tool. It is similar to WLS, and you can actually invoke it using JBoss-CLI.sh. Alright, so we'll get into all these things later. For now, let's go ahead and start the JBoss server. We'll be doing all these things for now in standalone mode. You're in standalone, standing alone. That's what this diagram is about. You're standing alone. A single instance is standalone mode. Now, how do you start it? You simply execute the standalone.sh. Where is that file? It's in domain home bin. Remember, the scripts for starting and starting are always available in the bin directory. So you are at JBoss home. This is our JB. Get into bin, start the server. So standalone.sh. Go ahead, enter. So it's coming up. Now if you observe, it's already up. See this one. This basically says JBoss EAP 6.2 started in 4067 milliseconds. Now it has started 129 of 186. We've shown that only. Now the good thing about JBoss, or the reason why it started so fast, is JBoss, even though has lots of services just like WebLogic, it does not start all the services. And one more thing, here we call everything is a service, means everything JBoss treats it like a service. It could be a cluster service, it could be a JDBC service, it could be a GMS service, it could be a replication service. Now these are the services that are offered by, it could be security services. The services offered by JBoss, they are not started by default always. Only the essential services started. Everything else is started on demand, means when you actually need it. But before we go in further, let's look at it. Let's look at what happened. This is where you started it. This is the JBoss home. It actually gets picked up automatically, and if you observe this, this is actually using the default Java in this system. Let's open another session here. Alright, let's go to students, JBoss ITP. Alright, then we have JBoss. Alright, now if you see this one, ps-ef grep java, you have this JBoss process. This is exactly like a WebLogic process. Only thing is, it's slightly different. You see this java-d standalone and all this stuff. This is the actual server process. JBoss.as means application server.standalone. org.jboss.as.standalone. It's similar to weblogic.server. Alright, everything else is actually similar. You have xmax value, everything. Alright, now what we can do is, you have started the server. Now when the server comes up, see, it is trying to listen on some ports. 9990, 999, 9999, then 4447, 8080, a lot of ports. So this is another difference like WebLogic and JBoss, is that WebLogic usually has only one port, if you observe, the listen port, and it marks a second port for SSL. On the same port you will actually access the console, you will send the general request, everything. Whereas here it's different. JBoss uses lots of ports. We will see all those ports later, but it uses lots of ports. So console is accessed on a different port, general request we will send on a different port. Alright, so if you actually want to see the ports, you can actually say netstat-na grep for let's just do less. Many of these ports are actually started by JBoss. You see these things, all these ports of 40837 is not started. Wherever you see 127 stuff, it's most likely started using JBoss. Choose one. 12447 is started. 32443 is started by this guy. 631 is started by this guy. A lot of ports. We'll see the list of ports later, but it's not one port like WebLogic. So that's you started your JBoss server, and you can see it using PSF grep Java. It's available here. Now to kill the JBoss, unfortunately there is no stop scripts available. You usually kill it using your PSF grep style. You kill it. You can actually kill using the command line also if you want to, but at this point it'll be slightly heavy. The shutdown is always a kill for JBoss, so you kill it using JBoss kill-3 process ID, or else you can actually launch the JBoss CLI.sh. This is just the initial thing. Then you can connect to JBoss. Using connect command. We will talk about it in a later. Now it's connected. Now you can shut down. So when I say shut down, it basically shut down. Alright. So here. So that's how it is started and stopped. So stopping is not that important. Starting, it may come in your interviews. How do you start a JBoss server? It's standalone.sh if you are in standalone mode. The same way, if you are in domain mode, you can actually use the domain.sh. Remember one thing, these two scripts will pick up two different XML files. Even though they both are in the same directory, it does not mean that the configuration files are same. Only some configuration files are same. We will see what those are later, but standalone.sh actually uses standalone.xml file. So each script is using a different one. So you have standalone.sh. It uses standalone.xml file. The domain.sh uses domain.xml file. Alright, now these two are in different locations. On the JBoss home, domain configuration is one thing. Alright, this one also JBoss home standalone configuration. Alright, these are two different locations. So the services available in each of these two things is different. So we have exited here. We don't have any servers run. Right. Now the same way like I started standalone, you can actually start the domain.sh also. So let's say we start the domain mode. So when you start the domain mode server, it actually starts more number of services compared to a standalone server. We will see the differences in the list of services that are started at a later point of time once we get deep into domain mode, but just to give you an idea, they are different in number. So we'll see how many are different here. So here you see this one here. It started in around 6419. It started 147 of total 209. Earlier it was 129 of 187. So around 129 services were started of 189. Now 147. So the cluster related, the domain related services are started. And also another thing is, if you try to do a PSF grep for Java, it's not one process anymore. It's multiple processes. See, this is one process. This is another process. Then this is another process. So this is another process. So at least 4 processes are started. Now these 4 processes have different purposes. We will see what are these processes, what are they meant for at a later point of time when you get into the domain mode. So again, I'm going to shut down the server by doing a control C here. So when you say shut down, when I did a control C, it basically coming down. So it stops all the 4 processes. So if you see PSF new group for Java, see, nothing is done. So that's starting and stopping the service in standalone mode and domain mode. Now let's go on and concentrate only on standalone mode from now on. So we'll get into domain mode later. So we'll be talking about deployment. So now we know how to install it, then how to start it. Now once we started, we will do a little customization, like where is it listening, how to access the web console and all that stuff. Currently our JBoss server, if you start with the general inbuilt options, it starts on 127.0.0.1, and that's not something that we always want. In real time you would want it to listen on a specific IP port. Standalone.sh, so it's coming up. So you see here, so it's listening on 127.0.0.1, and then it's listening on some of these ports. The ports are okay, but the listen address is a slight problem, because if this starts listening on 127 only, we will not be able to access this management port, because we are connecting to that box from PuTTY. We're on a different machine. So we'll be changing this 127.0.0.1 to 192.168.128.6. That's one thing. The second thing is, look at the Java it's using. So probably it's not always the case that we want the JBoss to use the default Java. We want to use the Java that we specified. So if you do a PSF near grep, for Java, you see, this is actually using this Java. We don't want this Java. Instead, we want to install our own Java, and that Java has to be used by JBoss, the 1.6 version of Java. So we'll get into a little bit of customization of the lesson address and the Java home and other stuff. Then we will also have to write the wrapper scripts. Obviously we cannot depend on this one, so it's just like WebLogic that we write the wrapper script. Once it is done, then we'll actually get into a deployment. All right.